to the rim. Garnett on the slam. Oh, using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry.
The 2020 Lakers began forming a year earlier when LeBron James chose them, and people joked he'd gone to the Cavs of the West. It was at a time when Golden State still had no end in sight, so nobody knew what the overall plan was anyway. There were only ideas, like the one to acquire Anthony Davis. This of course failed during the 2019 regular season, which as we now know was crucial to their eventual success. Recall at the top of the decade, New York went all in on grabbing Melo after being unwilling to gamble losing out on him over summer. Fair enough, but it gutted the roster. Braun and AD alone weren't moving the needle, though it still made sense to make every attempt early on. Winding up with no second star for LeBron actually put his status as a Laker at risk. Everything always works out in LA though. After the draft lottery, New Orleans jumped 6 spots from their original projection to nab the first pick with only 6% odds. Lakers jumped 7, moving into the 4th spot in a year where they were originally running into roadblocks acquiring AD. In February, Magic Johnson accused then New Orleans GM Dell Demps of negotiating in bad faith, as they'd practically offered every available asset. 2 months later, on the heels of the failed deal and pressure heating up to decide what to do with LeBron if there was no star available, Magic abruptly stepped down as LA's president, giving us a meme for the ages. So yeah, up until the point New Orleans fired Demps, hired former Cavs GM David Griffin, and ended up with the first overall pick against the odds to replace Davis with a young generational talent, things were kind of dead in the water. On June 15th, 2019, the Los Angeles Lakers acquired Anthony Davis in exchange for Alonzo Ball, Josh Hart, Brandon Ingram, and 3 first-rounders which, yes, included the newly acquired 4th overall pick. LA had essentially cashed out all the assets who didn't make sense around LeBron on this timeline for their win now big man. Oh, and yeah, winning now was absolutely on the table. In just an insane turn of events over 4 months, not only did LA now have a launching pad, Golden State had been moved off the board via injury. Seriously, this is always the part I've never emphasized enough about LeBron's Lakers title. From the start, there was zero guarantee he was ever even going to get close. If you've forgotten, during summer 2018, we used to draw up pictures of him with the Sixers, maybe he joined the Rockets. The kicker was, even with those deals, none of them made anyone confident he could beat the Warriors 4 times in a couple of weeks. The fact these stars had aligned to completely reverse their situation with the Pels and clear the super team era out at once. Oh yeah, that's the real funny part about the plot twist. Not only was Golden State out, it was looking unlikely Toronto would get a shot seriously at defending their title. Kawhi had been linked to some LA team for at least a year now, and after winning the championship, he had the power to potentially act on it. The NBA world waited in silence as he made his decision for days. People were tracking his flights, theorizing what it all meant. If he chose the Lakers, he'd join the wing next to LeBron with AD in the paint. Damn whoever the supporting cast was gonna be. Unfortunately, this meant we'd just be moving from one super team to the next, and fans were dying for parity. Thankfully, Leonard kicked off the duo era by, oh wow, this part actually got a lot more interesting in the last few days. So, I'm glad there's potentially been some movement in this part of the story, because in the context of the last 5 years, it actually makes a lot more sense this way. Just recently, the Clippers had to deny allegations that Kawhi's camp took $28 million through a no-show endorsement with a now bankrupt tree planting company called Aspiration. Money, a report says, flowed to his LLC while the firm had fresh investment from Steve Ballmer. The league has opened an inquiry. The team calls the claims, quote, provably false. If any of this sticks, it reframes that summer in a way we couldn't have imagined, because he allegedly also asked both Toronto and LA to make extra financial accommodations. It makes us remember the old questions of 2019. Why did Kawhi so easily leave such a fire situation in Toronto in the first place? Most wrote it off as just another Kawhi thing. Okay, the quiet guy and his camp didn't like the Spurs anymore, but were traded across the border against their will. I guess it makes sense he immediately did things his way. It would also make sense that a lot of behind-the-curtain business in basketball happened something like this. Back in December 2019, multiple outlets relayed that the NBA looked into complaints about illegal benefits during Kawhi's free agency, with the perks being requested by his uncle allegedly. The league said it found no evidence the Clippers granted those requests, but paired with this week's story, we may know slightly more about how the next big three was thwarted, and the 2020s NBA completely changed. Regardless, parity had been restored, multiple teams had interesting pairings who'd give them a shot at a title, and 2 of those pairings now shared a building, with very real chances to bring LA another title. The Lakers pivoted from third max to every piece fits. As a consolation from Toronto, Danny Green was signed to space the floor. KCP had already been on the roster for years and hypothetically could play the perfect 3-and-D role for them off rip. Avery Bradley could do the same, but at the point of attack, as he was signed to do a lot of the same dirty work. Like KCP, Caruso had already been in the cut, now ready to blossom into the perfect role-playing guard on any championship team. In late August, they made headlines by giving Dwight Howard a non-guaranteed deal, as he'd spent the last 4 seasons on 4 different squads, most recently flaunting a failed year in Washington with only 9 games due to lower back surgery. In his original Lakers stint, it was also his back that begun to nerf him. Now he was just trying to prove he could still contribute. Rondo remained on the roster, continuing to lend valuable IQ next to Braun. JaVale McGee also remained, lending his size and athleticism rather than IQ. Kuzma survived the deadline, setting up the timeline where we got one of the worst pictures of all time, and Frank Vogel now had all the tools needed to stamp an identity. For all the talk about what the bubble did for the Lakers, there's little mention of their 17-2 burst out of the gate, tied for the best start in franchise history, and they did it while stacking real road wins in the altitude of Denver, Utah on a back-to-back, and Miami, where they snapped the Heat's 11-0 home start. This squad made statement after statement in November and December. They weren't even totally clean health-wise. Avery Bradley missed 13 games early with a hairline fracture in his right leg, then returned in mid-December and eventually slid into that we need one more guard who can defend and hit role perfectly. Through the stretch, LeBron posted 26, 11 assists, and 7 rebounds with 50% from the field and 36% from 3. We were potentially headed for real beef, as in a game in December, Giannis took it upon himself to raise the crown after another dominant performance. Milwaukee too was playing at a 70-win pace, in what would culminate in one of the better forgotten regular seasons. The more important thing here was LeBron sees everything, trust. In that same beginning stretch, AD missed only 1 game, tallying 26 a night with 9 rebounds and 47% from the field. There were never any real questions about how they'd fit, and the duo was every bit of what was advertised. One of their 2 losses came on opening night against the Clippers without Paul George. Game 1 of the regular season didn't improve too much, though those were beef matches, and everyone seemed to count just a little bit more. This had never been more important than on Christmas Day, where yet another tight affair went the Clippers' way. In the closing moments, Beverly got the best of LeBron on the final attempt, which he was sure to let the world know about. By this point, the only teams LA was losing to were the teams they'd probably have to beat in a series. The loss against the Clippers capped off 4 straight, with Denver and Milwaukee having happened right before. Though if you've had any experience at all following a Braun team by then, it wasn't super crazy. His units would habitually look questionable against certain teams, normally just to make everyone completely forget months later. Under the hood, the profile matched the eye test anyway. Top 5 defense, elite rim protection, and maybe the most well-rounded team in the league. LeBron basically ran point, leading the league in assists for the only time in his career. About the only reason he wasn't running away with MVP was the existence of Giannis, which, earlier, Braun always remembers. On March 6, the Lakers and Bucks rematched for what would be their second and last meeting unless someone showed up to the finals. James took the challenge head on, finishing with 37, 8, and 8. Plus 3 steals as LA coincidentally clinched its first playoff berth since 2013. Almost immediately, the media took to tightening the MVP race. After this weekend, it'd be hard not to. 2 days later, their third match from across the hall. What better time to take the first win of the year? LeBron followed up the Bucks outing with 28, 9, and 7. Most importantly, making a scene out of the bucket which sealed it. He hadn't sealed MVP, but with now barely a month remaining in the season, the hype could be strong enough to make it a real convo. 48 hours later, they tripped against Brooklyn in a 1-possession game, just something that happens in the ebbs and flow of a season. What if the season stops flowing? When the season stopped flowing on March 11th, the Lakers were 49-14, top seed in the West and winners of 11 of their last 12. Probably sounds crazy given the discourse you heard surrounding their bubble run, right? Funny enough, rewind the clock 5 years and I was debating people tooth and nail against bringing professional basketball back months later to finish at Disney. I'm almost certain, without even checking, the video I made around that time probably predicted the term Mickey Mouse ring. It was so obvious how it'd be viewed years later, I'm not even sure why fans and media alike continue to push the whole nobody would hate on it if someone other than LeBron won it narrative. What? The bubble was literally a setup for any team who won it. It's actually one of the few things I've ever agreed with retirement Shaquille O'Neal on. Before the return, he was very outspoken on what the perception of the title would be. No crowds, no home court advantage, the advantage contenders legitimately work for year-round. Not to mention the 5-month rest no team has ever gotten directly before a title run. On the flip side, the hardship stood to be everything you've heard through the years from players who were actually there. Prolonged isolation, Nothing but basketball. No real distractions. And that goes for whether they were welcomed or unwelcomed. Austin Rivers and a good bit of others have gone on to say it was actually the hardest championship to win. Regardless, everything in life is optics. And the optics for any team who walked away with gold would be, hey, you just won a title after a completely unexpected break, and did so on the same course AAU teams are crowned on without any kind of crowd factor. If the Nuggets, who'd placed second in 2019 only to be upset by the Blazers, were able to win their first championship in franchise history here, this at a time when like a majority of the fan base really was not rating them. Come on, man. Celtics, who'd been routinely harassed about how old their last title was, James Harden's first and only ring in the bubble, Giannis. I'm sorry, there is almost no champion you could have crowned under these circumstances that would be treated equally by the masses. That doesn't make it worth less. It's kinda like getting cooked on Twitter, who fucking cares? It means this is how most people view and talk about the 2020 championship, and that much you could see coming when the bubble was still only an idea. That being said, I'm glad my objections didn't catch on, cause the basketball was amazing, especially at that time in the world. The restart opened like a movie. Lakers Clippers again, on night 1. After 5 months off, the gritty nature of the matchup certainly hadn't faded. So much of the NBA has always unfolded way too much like cinema, as the league could not have asked for a better restart. It came down to a last shot, much the way many believed a potential playoff series would pan out. As if the statement he made to close the league hadn't been loud enough, LeBron rattled both Kawhi and PG on the final sequence, securing the stop and win in what would be their final meeting for at least a month. Within a few days, they'd clinched the West first seed for the first time since 2010, behind a classic AD banger with 42-12 against Utah. The rest of the seeding slate looked like a team that had already checked the 2 boxes that mattered: healthy and positioned. They went 3-5, experimented with lineups, and got a little reminder that Kyle Kuzma could punch above his weight. His corner 3 over a contest to beat Denver capped off a 25-point night, serving as one of those moments that would matter later when Vogel was choosing combinations. That's it. The Nuggets weren't even playing the starters during the sequence. Round 1 arrived with an internet narrative. Are the hot Blazers dangerous? Portland had basically lived a playoff series for 2 weeks just to make it. Charles Barkley, trolling or not, picked them to upset the Lakers. To his credit, they stole game 1 while LA brick jumpers, and Lillard continued proving why he'd been the bubble MVP. Of course, this was little more than the random game and inferior team wins sometimes at the start. 4 straight, 4-1. And of course, there was Mamba Day in game 4. The black jerseys, game over by halftime. It'd been a subplot of the 2020 Lakers fans couldn't fully appreciate under the circumstances. In January, Kobe Bryant had tragically passed in a random helicopter crash, which caught the entire world off guard. Just months before, he'd been courtside with his daughter, taking in the beginning of what could possibly be another Lakers championship. He joked with Luka, dapped up LeBron. The two had spoken so highly of each other through the years, and we were now on a timeline where a retired Kobe Bryant could potentially be looking on from the crowd as LeBron James won a championship as a Laker. It was due to be a beautiful moment for the game. Instead, Bryant miraculously left behind a final tweet which told James to keep pushing the game forward. This one has always been insane to me. The tragedy happened, 2 months later basketball was gone, and now there we were months later, as his old franchise donned the Mamba Day jerseys hoping to finish the job with him in mind. As if 2020 needed any more national stories. The bubble itself stopped cold on August 26th. Jacob Blake was shot in Kenosha 3 days earlier, and the Bucks, closest team to the event, never came out for tip-off. Within hours, every game on the slate, including Lakers-Blazers Game 5, was off, and the hotel ballrooms turned into town halls. Reports out of that first late-night meeting had the Lakers and Clippers as the only teams ready to shut the whole thing down. LeBron pushing for concrete action from ownership while most of the room wanted to keep playing. By the next morning, the conversation had shape. Players and owners agreed on actual commitments, including these jerseys, which low-key saw a couple turn into memes. 48 hours after the walkout, the bracket restarted. LA closed Portland once play resumed, but the pause left a mark on the run and reminded us what a chaotic time we were experiencing. I myself remember going to the court after hearing basketball may again be canceled. It was getting hard to wrap your mind around the year we were having and how anyone was supposed to be focusing on a professional sport. If nothing else, I don't doubt the players when they talk about the mental toll the whole experience took. Houston was the philosophical test. After swapping CP3 for Russ, they put both feet down and banking that a small, spaced lineup could maybe cheat the game a bit. No centers, just PJ Tucker with James Harden at the head of a math problem. Of course, the Rockets too picked up Game 1, challenging AD to have the same impact with the table kind of set for him. He did so, and absolutely destroyed any illusion you could gain an advantage playing small with him around. We saw more of him at the 5, which would be hilarious for reasons later. LeBron hunting mismatches, AD rolling into empty lanes. Yeah, the fact every game finished by double digits isn't the least bit surprising. Also, apparently a bit of hazing for a future teammate was in line. After another gentleman's sweep, the final test lay in not the Clippers. Despite 4 regular season nail-biters, the Clippers curse would prevail as they dropped one of the nastiest 3-1s of all time, and played right into the moniker that nothing good ever happens to this franchise. George had come up empty, Kawhi had no answers, and Denver continued their hot streak as this was following up another 3-1 series with insane shot making. Though, them being down 3-1 in the first place was why this series felt like a consolation. We'd been plotting the Battle of LA for a year now, and could have lived with it happening under crowdless conditions. The Nuggets had done the whole seed high thing already, and no one was under the illusion they'd sneak one by LeBron James. Los Angeles handedly took Game 1, flowing into a much tighter second affair. The Nuggets, much like they'd spent their last month, saved their best for last, forcing a 9-0 run in the final 2.5 minutes to get back in it. Jokic took the lead back with one of his patented hook shots nobody would eventually be able to do anything about, leading to their defensive sequence which probably should have just tied the series right there. They left too much time on the clock. Davis caught an ATO on the left wing, rose over the contest, and buried a walk-off 3 yelling Kobe in the process. Also very on the nose given the jerseys for Game 4 of Round 1. That shot didn't just win a game, it solidified the emotional temperature of the series. Denver answered in Game 3, which made losing the opportunity for a 1-1 series even harsher. These Western Conference Finals would mark Dwight's final real contribution in the league, as he became one of the last bigs to effectively guard Jokic, contributing to LA's 3rd straight gentleman sweep. This of course led to the long-awaited finals in not the Milwaukee Bucks. Like LA's counterpart, Giannis and company had been packed up in round 2 by Miami, whose unit was seemingly custom made to shut down their offense. Just as there would be no sequel to the regular season shenanigans involving the Clippers, there would be no final battle for the crown. Apparently, there never was. The Heat had been a dark horse contender, executing well enough to raise eyebrows, not quite talented enough to explain how they'd defeat any of the more interesting teams in the series 4 times. Well, except for Milwaukee, you could see that one clearly. As it pertained to these finals, the Lakers were the comfortable pick, and with good reason. During Game 1, Goran Dragic's foot gave out, as he suffered a torn plantar fascia. Bam Adebayo's shoulder cost him 2 games, and suddenly the underdog had to win a chess match with half its pieces. LA up 2-0, this looked like a classic gentleman sweep at best, giving us one of the most memorable moments of the 20s. With Miami on death's doorstep, Butler dropped in bucket after bucket, willing his unit to the finish line in a game where Myers Leonard and Kelly Olynyk had been the lone bigs. Jimmy dropped in 10 fourth quarter points with 5 assists to complete a 40-point, 11-rebound double-double, which brought the series score to 2-1. Winning a single game under the circumstances had been Herculean, and Jimmy's meme lives on in glory so much because of it. Coming back to this retrospective, I did not remember which game this happened in. It for real just kinda represents Jimmy in the finals period. Unfortunately, the picture also only even exists because of the ridiculous output it took to get them to that point. There was no realistic world where a banged up roster was going to pull together 4 wins against what had been a dominant team the entirety of the 2020 season. In Game 4, the Lakers tightened the vice. More AD at the 5, and perfectly timed contributions from the role group as KCP and Green provided the distance needed to push the score to 3-1. They'd taken the best of what Miami had to offer as well. Duncan Robinson practically earned his next contract here, combined with Hero and Bam doing enough to give Miami a chance. This is what hurt. They'd go on to win Game 5 behind Green's infamous miss, leaving the door open that nobody ever asked about because it's one of the lowest rated finals ever. Exactly how close was Miami? They'd been mostly counted out from the start, but with a Jimmy masterclass missing 2 starters, and having pushed a series to 6 overall without a vital point guard, could they have pulled off another upset? It's also the question that would help lead Miami's front office to its downfall in the 2020s. And so, Game 6 was in fact the verdict. The Lakers swapped Dwight for Caruso to start, leaned fully into mobility and switches, and strangled Miami's movement right out of the gate. By halftime, the scoreline felt and looked like a scrimmage gone wrong. Rondo even turned the clock back, contributing 19 and 4 on an 8 of 11 shooting to become the second player ever to win a title in both Boston and LA. Yeah, spoiler alert, the favorites won. Which is why I've been so confused all these years. As you saw earlier, they were already likely to dominate most competition in a series. Yet, I'll never buy how this is some hated title reserved specifically for LeBron. I simply don't think there's any team you can put in this setting where the title ages favorably to fans. The awkward celebration with the elephant in the room being they were in an empty gym, the Kuzma trash bag picture after, the constant debating that's gone on ever since it happened. It's kind of like I never fail to say in these videos. Well, twice in this one. Everything in life is optics. And the optics alone of winning a title in an isolated gym with no follow-up parade was never gonna land. It's not an argument worth wasting time on for either side. Really, can two things not be true? Players will perceive it as the hardest because they were actually there living it. Fans mostly won't ever go with it because there's 70 plus other championships that look a certain way. There's an energy to them. Home court played a factor in many of the greatest wins ever. Isn't that part of what made 2016 so special? In any case, much like nobody will ever be able to take Durant's rings away, as time passes, the context of 2020 won't hit quite as hard. LeBron has 4 NBA championships, and off the strength, this one has been comfortably in the GOAT conversation ever since. I think 2016 legitimately placed him there, however, another title on top of that with the Lakers has made it feel very comfy. Rondo added hardware, Dwight solidified his legacy as he turned out to be much more than just a gamble, and multiple role players showed proof of concept. This was a team that could win multiple championships, which is something known to be agreed upon by the discourse following their breakup. Another reason it doesn't make sense to ever say the title just doesn't count or counts for less. Their move to sacrifice depth for age and Westbrook is one of the most harshly judged events of the 20s for a reason. 5 years later, we look on as LeBron's retirement inches ever closer, allegedly. He plays alongside Luka, which, have fun explaining that one to a fan in 2020. The trade potentially undid years of damage as the roster wilted and descended into stagnation as they suffered a lack of trade capital. AD, after years of headlines saying how he didn't like to play center, had excelled at the 5 throughout the run. Unfortunately, it was the only title he and Bron would ever produce, or even really come close to producing for that matter. Regardless, the 2020 Lakers are still one of the more improbable teams ever to me. To begin its formation during the Warriors dynasty that could have easily gone on as long as Durant wanted it to at the time, and come out the other side with the title 2 years later is no small feat. And regardless of any discourse, the mission was accomplished. So as they embark on building a title team around Luka, they can rest on the fact LeBron's time here wasn't a failure. Seriously, you subtract this run and it's a nasty era. In 2018, they were blessed with one of the greatest players of all time and no solid plan. It brought gold. In 2025, they were again blessed. Only their lack of finesse in the front office has now been duly noted. Hopefully, when and if Luka manages to get them back to the top of the mountain, it's in front of a normally functioning world.